Meanwhile, in Brazil, they are still dealing with one of the worst situations with COVID in the world right now. And we talk about this periodically, partially because for some reason, it just doesn't really get covered in the United States how bad it is there. We had this brief period where people acknowledged how bad the situation was in India about a month or two ago. But Brazil is really suffering. Their death toll just passed 500,000, the official death toll. God knows what it actually is. We passed 600,000. In India, where it's also really bad, deaths may range from 600,000 to as many as 4.2 million. We certainly don't know now. We might not know for a long time. But in Brazil, it's really bad. Nearly 18 million people have been infected. They're averaging about 73,000 new cases and 2,000 deaths a day. I believe the last daily reporting was over 2,300 deaths, which is still terrible. Yes, 2,301, I think it was on Saturday. Only about 11% of residents are believed to be fully vaccinated, so they're apparently outdoing Japan, to reference one of our recent stories. And there have been massive protests over the past week about the current state. That hitting the 500,000 dead mark is going to inspire some people to expect some sort of change. And bear in mind, we've got next year an election coming. We've been talking about that recently. President Jair Bolsonaro has not been good on the pandemic. He called it a little flu, while refusing to follow or promote mask wearing, quarantines, and social distancing, despite having contracted the virus himself. He also encouraged large gatherings and disparaged vaccines. And I swear that paragraph is about Bolsonaro, not about Donald Trump, although every one of those facts is true, basically. Except with Trump, at least, the vaccines he disparaged were non-COVID vaccines. He seems to think you should take the COVID one at least. So, and by the way, in terms of international sporting events, last month, they announced that Brazil would be hosting the Copa America soccer tournament after Argentina said it would be too irresponsible to do it. It's worse in Brazil, they're going ahead. This could potentially have some effect, David, on the presidential election next year. But as of right now, at least, they are really suffering when it comes to COVID, and their government just doesn't really seem to care much.
Yeah, I mean, my first reaction is my humanitarian empathy goes to everybody in Brazil, whether you're healthy or whether you're not. I mean, it is a horrible situation. It is terrifying. It was awful to see. I think the long view in all of this is that I think many years from now, people, particularly in political science, international relations, governmental studies, will look back and say, okay, there were several examples where incompetent leadership literally caused hundreds of thousands of people to lose their lives. And we're talking about democracies where there's incompetent leadership, not just Donald Trump in the United States, but Bolsonaro in Brazil. You can literally draw the connection now in both countries between a federal government, a federal response that is inept, that says, no, this isn't my responsibility. Everybody's on their own. It's up to you to figure this out. It's up to states or provinces to figure this out. And that has been a disaster. And so there should be no argument about the connection now between competent leadership and how you prevent deaths in a public health crisis. And hopefully that's the lesson that we all take away from this, and that generations will take away from this moving forward.
I hope so. It seems like a very small silver lining that at least if you preside over so many dead, you'll lose your job at least. So we'll see if that happens with Bolsonaro. We'll also see if you can potentially get the job back in a couple of years with Donald Trump. It seems like in a democracy, these sorts of things should matter, but we're gonna test that internationally over the next few years.
For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.